I recently got new all-season tires for my Tesla Model 3, the Continental Pure Contact LS tires to be exact. And now that we don't have a four-wheel drive truck, we need to do what we can to make sure the car will be able to handle winter driving conditions. Now, as an added backup, I also purchased snow chains from the Tesla website, because here in the state of California, unless you have a four-wheel drive with snow tires, it's a common occurrence during the winter months for chain requirements in the foothills and mountains, especially here in Northern California. Now, even in the days of owning a four-wheel drive truck, we rarely used it in the snow. But in those unusual circumstances, it was a great feature to have. Now, since my father-in-law took ownership of the truck, if push comes to shove, we would most likely be able to use it if we were anticipating extreme winter conditions. However, if that option fails, I wanted to make sure that my long-range rear-wheel drive can handle driving on snow and ice. So we headed out to the mountains the day after a snowstorm hit, producing travel delays due to chain requirements. However, by the time we got up into the mountains, all of the chain requirements had been lifted. But to make sure we were driving in the snow, we decided to hit some of the back roads just outside of a town called McLeod. Now, these roads are maintained, but only to a certain level, and are typically covered in snow during a big part of the winter months. Now, before we move on, I would like to throw a few disclaimers out there. Number one, I understand in order to get the best traction in the snow, it's best to use snow tires. And many argue that all-season tires are a scam and useless in the snow. So if you live in an area where it snows during the winter months and the roads are covered in snow on a regular basis, then it absolutely makes sense to have two sets of tires, one for the summer months and another for the winter months. But for people like me, when you're driving on dry and wet pavement 99% of the time, it just doesn't make any sense to have two sets of tires. This is where all-season tires come into play, with chains as a backup during the more extreme conditions. Now, number two, I also recognize the fact that we will be conducting our tests in pretty tame conditions, and understand that there are different weather conditions that can create different types of winter driving challenges, such as temperature and whether or not it's snowing. We will be on compact snow with patches of ice with an outside temperature of about 32 degrees Fahrenheit, which is right at that freezing point. Now, quite honestly, I would much rather start here, get a sense of how well it performs, and then step up a notch when it's snowing and there are chain requirements. Now, if I do get a chance to venture out into more extreme conditions, then I might do a follow-up video in the future. In the meantime, let's put my Tesla Model 3 to the test in the snow. Now, once we transitioned from pavement to compact snow, other than a more bumpy ride, the feel of the car really didn't change much. Now, granted, it was still early in the game as I had yet to stop or even make a significant turn. But once I did need to slow down, aware and conscious of the fact I was on snow, I took it easy on easing off the accelerator since I was still on one pedal driving. Now, once again, the feel of the car hadn't changed and had yet to feel unsafe. Now, upon coming to a complete stop and making a turn, I didn't feel any loss of control. Up until this point, I was driving like I was in the snow so as not to lose control of the car. So now it's time to drive like I'm not in the snow and drive a little less conservatively. Now, the first test was to step on the accelerator a little more aggressively, and off the bat, I ended up spinning out. Now, I was able to get out pretty quickly, but slipped a few more times before getting enough momentum. The next test was to see how quickly I could stop, and minus a little bit of skid, it actually performed quite well. Now I wanted to see how well it would do with an abrupt turn, and as expected, the turn didn't take until I slowed down. At one point, I did end up slightly in the ditch, causing the left wheel to spin without any forward movement. Now I was able to rock back and forth to get out, but at one point it did make me a little nervous. Sometimes on these back roads, it's difficult to turn around. Now I was able to make about a 5-point turn, making sure to avoid the ditches, but it performed well without any spinning. Overall, I think it's safe to say that on packed snow, the all-season tires and the Model 3 in general performed quite well, with a few reminders that I'm not driving a four-wheel drive with winter tires. Now, one thing I do regret is forgetting to try it in slip start, but I'll be sure to do that if I do a follow-up video. All right, so where I think I'm going to store in the winter at least is the chains along with my charger, my air compressor, my patch kit, everything. I'm also, at least during the winter months, gonna have my chains in the front here, so it's a great spot for it. So as you can see, of course, this is the one that comes with, or actually you order from the Tesla store online. So these are designed for Tesla, for the Model 3. So you can rest assured that these are gonna be safe to use on the tires. Now, they do not recommend, which come on over here, they do not recommend that you put any on the front tires, that you never put chains on the front tires. They only recommend that you put them on the rear tires. And again, because we're low profile, chains can damage the normal chains. That you go to any store to get chains, you don't want to use any other chains. These are low profile chains. So let's come over here and take a look at what the kit comes with. And it opens up, and on either side, you can see the chains that come in here. There's also, what's kind of neat, is you've got the instructions. It's not a normal piece of paper. It's kind of a waterproof type paper here. So when you are in extreme conditions, you don't have to worry about these instructions getting damaged. So that's kind of neat. And another thing I'd like to mention is that I have never used chains in my life before. Now, I will admit I did try this at home before I did this, but I thought I would do this out in the conditions to show you. So these are the ones I actually did not open up. Let me go ahead and open this up. It has some kind of sticker on it, so I have to break that. There we go. All right, so here it is right here. You can kind of see how this works. Now, these are self-tensioning, so that's another trick that I hear, that it's difficult to keep the chains with a proper tension. But what's cool about these is you don't have to worry about that. It's self-tensioning. So once you come over here, and you can see on this, this is what creates the tension. This is what gives you that automatic tension. So when you want to open this, I go ahead and I take this and I click it. It allows me to pull this out. You can kind of hear that. So you want to pull that out first. And then you come over here. And I'm going to take these chains. And once you come over here, see if you can get in here and see. So what I need to do is snap that back in. So you can see right here, that's what I unsnapped, and I snap that back in there. And then I take these chains around. right there. There you go. So now you can kind of see initially how these are kind of coming on here. This, again, I've done this once before at home. Let me double check to make sure I'm doing this right. All right, I had to double check, yeah, but it is, I just go ahead and I take it and I clip this right onto the end of this red, the red chain right here. And then there's another spot down here. Let me get that. So you can imagine how fun this would be if it was extreme conditions. But this actually is too far down, so I need this part that I had to reattach or attach up here. This actually ends up placing behind or right, like we're looking at from the back, it kind of rests right about here. So you can kind of see how now these are a little bit more in place. So now, yes, much easier here. So then this is a hook right here. Snow is kind of in there, you hook it right in there. All right, so now that I've got these positioned right here, come over here, and you see right here, remember this is where I did to release this cable right here. So now the arrow says to push it this way for drive. So what I'm doing, see how you can hear that tension? See how it's this automatic tension right now. So right now they are on. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna spare you the boring part of putting on the other one, but I'm gonna put the other one on, and then from there, once we do that, I'm gonna drive forward a little bit and let these kind of auto adjust and then come out and make sure everything's okay. But once we do that on the other side, we should be good to go. So after putting the second one on, which was a little bit more difficult, I'll have to admit, my hands were getting cold. You feel that sense of urgency, but really, all in all, I'd say about 10, 15 minutes tops is what it took to get these on. And then I rolled probably about, I don't know, maybe 10 feet forward, and it was just kind of allowed to adjust. So let's come over here, and you can see a couple of the safety features first and foremost. See these plastic pieces right here? This helps protect your wheels, so you're not going to get any scratches on your wheels, so that's kind of another cool thing about it. But you can see how it's nice and tight and the way it needs to be. So let's come around on the other side. And same story on this side as well. Things look like they're in pretty good shape. You can see the protection. I will admit there is a little bit of chain kind of rubbing against the wheel here, so that may create a little bit of a scratch, but we'll kind of wait and see what happens with that. But all in all, looks like everything's ready to go. So I think at this point, what I'm going to do is kind of take it for a drive and see how these things do, if we do actually indeed get better traction from some of the tests that we did earlier.
Now we did get up to about 40 miles per hour, and even at that speed, the chains were barely noticeable and were surprisingly smooth. The chains weren't banging up against the wheels or the wheel well, making me feel confident that these are safe to use on the car and won't damage anything.
We also tested to see how fast it would stop, and it performed much better than without chains, but the anti-lock brakes made it feel a little more clunky. All right, so we went ahead and we did some tests here. Now it's time to take off the chain. So let's go ahead and go through that process, see how difficult or easy it is, depending on how you look at it. So of course, the first and foremost, this is that auto tensioning system I was talking about. So now that we're not going to be using it for driving, you hit it, you turn it this way when you want to drive, you turn it this way to open it up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. What that's going to do is I'm going to take this pulley, I'm going to pull that out as far as it'll go. So we're good there. And then we just take this, actually no, this is in the red one. That one, right down here. We got another one that we take off. No, again, I'm a rookie here. It's actually this right here. There we go, just like that. Okay, then of course up here, oh, it moved. It moved down over. So that's the tricky part. I'm trying to find that connection part that I had, and I can't seem to find it. Oh, found it. It's actually over here. And I can't pull this up forward, so I have to, ooh, that is not. I think the trick is to kind of pull it up more. Oh, I found it. So look over here. It was down over here. Now when I installed it, it was up a bit higher. So now that I know how it works, I just kind of twist it, pull it apart. And now that's the easy part. Now the thing is, it's still kind of on here. So I'm gonna have to just kind of pull forward a little bit to get that off. So let's go ahead around the other side, see if that one's any easier. So once again, I'm gonna take this self-tensioning system, I'm gonna open it up, I'm gonna pull this like that. We start off by taking this one off, take the other one off right here. Let's see if it's easier to find this one. And that one also moved up, down over here. So let me see if I can pull this up a little bit more. Because this one is definitely not that easy to get to. I can tell you right now off the bat, more tricky to take these things off, but I got it. What's making this difficult, and I'll kind of tell you what I'm talking about, is when I put these on, I had some leverage kind of between the bottom of the tire and the top, and it was easier for me to kind of work with it in there. But when you're trying to take them off, they've really kind of, the tension had adjusted, and it's hard to really kind of pull it back up over there. So you kind of have to work behind the wheel and kind of go off a feel. At least that's the experience I had with both of these. So, you know, that's a little bit more tricky taking them off, but nonetheless, we were successful. So now the trick is, again, I want to get off of this chain. So I'm just going to pull this forward a little bit. Get off the chain. chains that are off of the tires, and we're ready to hit the road again. All right, so now that I've had a chance to drive in the snow without the chains and with the chains, you know, I mentioned that a little bit earlier, it's clearly much better to have the chains on. You have a lot more traction. When you're doing those abrupt stops, the anti-lock brakes do kick in a bit, but again, that's just kind of obviously a safety feature, but it stops really well in the snow. You can really get a good start in the snow as well with those chains. Now, when you have the all-season tires like me, they're obviously not going to perform as well as, say, dedicated winter tires, but from the standpoint of an all-season tire, I'd have to say that these have performed really well, and I'm happy with their overall performance on these roads. Now, this is compact snow that we're on, so it may be a bit of a different story if there's, you know, maybe some loose snow that you're dealing with, but for the most part, I feel much safer and better knowing that if we are going to be hitting some of the back roads that are maintained, obviously, these were plowed, but there's still a lot of snow on the road, that I feel pretty confident that this car is going to do quite well in the snow, in obviously not very extreme conditions, but, you know, on a day like this, definitely not a problem, and I feel very safe and confident that both the tires and the chains, of course the tires I feel confident with, but obviously having the chains as a good backup is going to make it even better. And since we are in the neighborhood, it was time for a little fun. Now, obviously your best bet when it comes to driving in the snow is an all-wheel drive vehicle with winter tires. But when push comes to shove, the long-range rear-wheel drive Tesla Model 3 performs beautifully on compact snow and patchy ice, even in all-season tires. When driving conservatively, keeping control of the car is a breeze without much slipping while stopping or spin-outs while getting the car going from a complete stop. However, you are reminded of your limitations when you decide to drive a little more aggressively. Now, using snow chains increases your safety twofold. The chains give you the grip you need by digging into the snow without causing any damage to the car. Now, the obvious downfall is the fact that you need to install them, and even though these are fairly easy to install compared to traditional chains, no system is perfect and can be a little frustrating, especially if you're in extreme winter conditions. However, well worth it if safety is your top priority. Now, the next test is to take it out in more extreme conditions with heavy accumulating snow. Now, I will most likely be required to put chains on, but that won't be a problem because after doing it a few times, it will be easier to do. Well, that wraps it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to help support this channel, you can do so by clicking the subscribe button below if you haven't done so already. Well, thank you all so much for watching, and stay positively charged.